It has come to my attention that people want to actually see the games tested and working every single time. Okay, well, let's do it. Madden 94, that's a good vintage. Little yellowing on the cartridge, no big deal. Super Nintendo on. Oh, okay. Now, I have already blown in this cartridge and used alcohol to clean it. You don't need to see that every time. So we're going to go ahead and open this up and see what happens. Eject. Oh, come on. That's what we're looking for. Now, supposedly, these traces look good. Context. This we have our game bit, the smaller game bit. Sega uses the larger one. This has come from a gentleman who said he worked at a Blockbuster that then were told to open the games and run a razor blade across the games when the Blockbuster was closing. Why? I don't know. This cartridge is giving me some problems here. There we go. It's a little bit gooey up in here, but I know people like to eat, I guess. Well, this looks... Do our visual inspection first and see if we can see anything going on. I mean, why they would want to destroy games, at least not this side. Looks good. And oh my god. No way. And I have like 6 games from this person. So, but are these, is this even deep enough to destroy the traces? I've heard of this. I've heard of this before, but we have seen Nintendo and some store policies, GameStop, especially for CD-based games. We have seen people, company policies be destroy things. And is that... Oh, God. This doesn't necessarily mean every single one is broken. I'm kind of at a loss for words because it's been a long time. And also, this may not be fixable because if this board is multi-sided, and if sometimes the damage were to go through and break things deeper in the board, if it's a multi-layer board, we'd be at a really big problem because you're not we can fix surface traces, sometimes different layers depending on what it is, but it's pretty rare. I guess we're going to go ahead and start testing continuity with toning. Let's see what we pick up. I mean, we're going to have some easy things to test first. All right, this has continuity. And it makes sense because the solder mask is peeled here, but not the trace, although I don't know how good it is. But the question is, does this get all the way over to the outside pin on the other side? And it does not. Okay. We'll zoom out just a little bit. So this trace here goes all the way to here, and we want to make sure it gets to all these points. There we go. So it just looks like it's a little bit sketch. What about this one? So we may just reinforce that. Man, some of these are deep though. That's a no connect 25. Nothing. Nothing. My enthusiasm to fix Madden here. Nothing. 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 Oh, all right. All right. Now we're talking. No connect. Now we're talking. Might as well just be repair every single one. That's what this is going to end up being. It's going to be fix every single trace. Is it even worth it? Yeah, I guess we're gonna clean this board first with some alcohol, and then we'll get into this. And then we don't even know if this will fix it, right? So this is that problem that we're gonna look at. Is we're gonna fix all these traces, and then yeah, I don't see anything on the other side. And then we're going to go ahead and pop this thing in, and then we're going to see if it even works. Let's go ahead, leave a comment now if you think this will work. Some of these are definitely really deep. The cool thing about Super Nintendo and a lot of these is you don't need a microscope to do this work. This is all extremely in the open when you're doing this trace repair. We're not taking off any small units. So if you're thinking of getting into the repair and you find trace work like this, if you're not replacing small components, then normally it's not a big deal to do repair like this. We're just gonna so let me see if I have a one that's in good condition. So for Super Nintendo, well, we can probably use this. But just to show you this, the entire trace is seen, and you can actually see a little bit of the board. See that gap? But do you see just where the two prong pegs are on the bottom of these contact points? And you'll see it on here. So this whole piece is seen, but this up to here, so about halfway through, is all that actually enters into the Super Nintendo. So normally, if your break point is at a good spot, you will want to connect from above the trace, the contact point, to its point. Sometimes people will do just a little wire between here and here. Sometimes they'll scrape here because this is bigger. And so if you run from, it's easier to connect here and then just run it straight to there rather than just a little wire here to here. I don't know what we're going to do yet. I'm going to get ready, and then I'm going to try not to pull all my hair out. All right, I'm going to do from now until the end of the video in voiceover, only because I had so many interruptions and took breaks while doing this and really want to just focus on what's going on here. So whenever you're doing work like this, you can see I'm just prepping the pad area that we're going to solder to. And sometimes I will use painter's tape in this situation to cover up the actual part of the contact points that will go in an old cartridge system, only because if you accidentally bump it with your solder iron, or anything can happen, and what will happen is the solder will wick into that part of the contact point so fast. So I'm just going through and I'm putting down just little bits of solder on here, just so when I go back later, it's much easier to combine and add solder when this is done, and I can just splash it all over the place and then really tidy it up later. I was deciding on how I wanted to fix this project, if I wanted to use enameled wire, non-enameled wire, plastic covered wire, and how I wanted it to look. And I knew this was going to be a big project, but I thought, why not kind of do this in the most beginner looking way with enameled wire, which is what I'm going to do first. And the cool thing is, when you're using enameled wire, the copper wire has an enamel coating on it, which the enamel coating is non-conductive. So enamel wires can sit on each other, they can touch each other, they can touch other points, and you're not going to have continuity through them. So you're not going to have to worry about making it really clean. You can do a bunch of wires and look all over. And I thought at this point, this cartridge is so Frankensteined inside. Let's have it look as Frankensteined as possible. Now, the only key when you're working with enameled wire is you have to either scratch off or burn the enamel off of your contact points. Otherwise, you won't be able to solder enameled wire down. So I do the first repair, and I just use a little bit of enameled wire right there. And then I said, why don't I use one piece of 1 nil plastic coated wiring? I just grabbed black, and you have to strip it off because it's plastic coated wire, and just to see how that worked. Obviously the plastic coating will not be conductive, but maybe it won't look as nice, and if it doesn't, I'll just leave it there. So that will give me, I'll be able to look side by side and look at the comparison. You can guess now I chose not to use it. Like I said, I looked at that and, I'm just looking it over and I'm like, oh, okay, now I could really make this look really freaky and use a rainbow color, just I have so much of different color plastic coated cabling and at different thicknesses as well to really just have this thing look as messed up as possible. But I'm looking at it as the perspective from a beginner solderer, and I thought, why not use this as a good teaching tool? I can bust this cartridge out when talking to people, and I can open it up and say, hey, look, this cartridge works, and then open it and really shock people at what the finished product is going to look like, which is really cool. So here I'm just comparing. I'm looking at the joints, and I'm saying, yes, the enameled wire is going to be the way to go. That first piece was short, so most of it's covered in solder, but the rest, here comes the big reveal. So I solder everything, and boom, I get this absolute mess. And you can tell there's a couple burn marks on the painter's tape. Now you could say that that's just from where the soldering iron tapped down for a second. And you could say, okay, I didn't care as much because the painter's tape was there. But again, if I would have just tapped down the iron with a little bit of solder on it, it would just cover the contact for where that's going to go. So I have made this huge squiggle of wires, and the enamel wires are sitting on each other, and they're touching multiple legs to the chips that are coming through. And I actually had someone there with me, and I was explaining this to them that, look, I'll touch the same piece of enameled wire right next to each other, and you won't get continuity. Then, so as I go through and I'm just touching the end points, because you have to make sure you burn away enough enamel at the tips for when you get connection that you do have that continuity running through the wiring. So I'm going to go through and check all of these. And most people, guys, enameled wire is a great way to start when soldering, because if you have plastic coated wire, it can be more of a mess, not in terms of the look, but you can melt the plastic on the tip and you expose more of the wire, and then you are having continuity and grounding points and shorts and everything. So if you use enameled wire, you can be sloppy like this, especially if you're not reselling this. I'm going to use this as a teaching point, so I wanted it to be more sloppy. But by the time you shove it in a cartridge like this, you close up the cartridge, it's sealed nice and good like this. We're going to take this busted cartridge, we're going to throw it inside the Super Nintendo. Now, I turned it on there and I saw that it was working, but then I saw, oh, you weren't in frame. And so here we go, and we throw it on, and boom. Who would have thought that this absolute Frankenstein cartridge would have come back and just survived this surgery? But there's John Madden, rest in peace. And that works, guys, so just do your best. Don't worry about it. Take care.